Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. So in this video, I have two updates for you. One very minor because I don't really have much legal insight to shed on it, whereas I do have quite a bit of legal insight to share on the other one. So I'm going to start off with the smaller update. I won't spend too much time talking about this, which is the Amanda de Cadenet update. Now, Amanda de Cadenet is a staunch supporter of the Me Too movement, and up until now, she has also been a staunch supporter of Amber. Now, if you've been following this case, you are aware of the phone conversations that were released by the Daily Mail, in which you can hear Amber verbally abusing Johnny and admitting that she has been physically abusive towards him on multiple occasions and couldn't even promise him that she would stop. Amanda de Cadenet was not aware of these recordings and was only made aware of them when the rest of us were made aware of them, when they were published. A source from de Cadenet's camp stated that Amanda feels she was used and misled by Amber and hopes Amber receives the help that she needs. So Amanda and Amber have been close for quite some time. There's even a photo of the two of them smiling at a party on the 22nd of May 2016, which was a day after the last fight that transpired between Amber and Johnny. So for these past 4 years, she has stood by Amber and her story. On the 18th of June of this year, so only a few days ago, she released a declaration in which she renounced all support for Amber in this case. She says, historically, women's rights in this area have been chronically undermined and women have had their violence silenced. This is one of the reasons why, when Amber told me her version of the conflict between her and Johnny, it was my inclination to believe her and support her. I recently acknowledged that I will not testify in Johnny Depp's upcoming defamation case against The Sun. I also acknowledge that new facts have come to my attention, which has changed my perspective on this matter. When the first audio tape was released and I heard Amber being verbally abusive to Johnny, I was horrified. I texted Robbie Kaplan, Amber's attorney, and let her know I needed to speak with her urgently. When we spoke, I told her how I was appalled and shocked to hear how Amber was speaking to Johnny and that it was not okay with me. When I confronted Amber concerning the recording, she informed me it was edited by Johnny's team. I had hoped Amber would take accountability for her behavior, but she did not. I have not spoken with Amber since this exchange and have come to the very painful realization that someone who I advocated for and believed so wholeheartedly was not entirely forthcoming with me. I have made this statement in support of due process and upholding the truth. I do want to point out that unlike Raquel and Melanie and Io and all the other supporters of Amber's that are now either keeping quiet or backing out of it like Melanie Inglessis, Amanda never really witnessed any of the alleged abuse that Amber relayed to her. So all she had to go off was Amber's story. Now, I'm not making excuses for her. I'm not saying that she was in the right to support Amber, but her support can be a little bit more understandable in comparison to, say, someone like Raquel or Melanie, because these two people were there and they knew that Johnny was never abusive towards Amber. They met with him, they interacted with him, they were around him. Whereas with Amanda, she wasn't there and she just had Amber's story to rely on. Now, one thing I do want to point out is the audio recordings were released quite a while ago now. So I am kind of confused as to why Amanda took so long to renounce her support. Amber's lawyers have recused themselves and now Melanie Inglessis wants to back out. So I do wonder whether it's an accumulation of all these things that have finally persuaded Amanda to publicly withdraw her support for Amber. Because if it was just the phone recordings and the audio recordings, why now? Why not withdraw your support when the rest of us, when the entire world was made aware of them many months ago? Whatever Amanda's reasons are, what matters is yet another person has stepped away from Amber and has publicly withdrawn their support for her. In Amanda's case, in a much more straightforward way, because unlike Melanie, she's not hiding behind excuses and saying, I'm afraid of contracting COVID and I am afraid of receiving death threats and losing my job. Amanda's being forthright and saying, I didn't know the truth, now I know it, and I'm not going to support what Amber's doing, which obviously paints her in a much better light than Melanie Inglessis. I do believe that other than her public support for Amber, Amanda never really involved herself in any legal capacity, so she didn't provide a declaration or any sort of witness testimony or evidence to support Amber because she never witnessed anything. So it's much easier for her to kind of withdraw herself because unlike Melanie Inglessis or Raquel or Io, for example, she never formally involved herself in the legal case. But this is what happens when you are a liar. I do have to say that while the truth always has a tendency to reveal itself, sometimes it can take years, if not decades, if not centuries, for someone to have their name cleared and to be vindicated. So Johnny is incredibly lucky that all of this evidence exists, because can you imagine if these phone calls were never recorded, or if these conversations that they had even in person were never recorded? No one would be aware of what transpired between the two of them. And it would have been a matter of he said, she said. So even staunch supporters of Johnny, such as myself, would have issues and difficulties with believing him beyond a reasonable doubt. It would be a matter of, well, how do we know who's saying the truth? So documenting evidence, recording conversations, taking photos of your injuries, all these things are so incredibly important in proving your side of the story. This can be a lesson to all of us to document these things. And I've said this in one of my earlier videos. I think the very first video I made on this topic. All right, I said I didn't have much to say on this topic, but clearly I did. Now this update is about the UK libel case that Johnny has brought against News Group, which is the parent company of the Sun newspaper. Now the Sun newspaper has applied to the High Court to throw out Johnny's libel claim against them. The reason being Johnny's apparent failure to disclose text messages in which he is asking to be supplied with drugs while he was filming in Australia in 2015. NGN's barrister told the court that his client had recently obtained a series of text messages between DEPP and his assistant Nathan Holmes from Heard's American lawyers. So NGN's lawyer is claiming that by failing to disclose these text messages, Johnny has breached a court order requiring him to submit all evidence pertaining to the defamation case that he has against Amber in the US. NGN's lawyer goes on to say that there is a real risk that the claimant, which is Johnny, has failed to provide proper disclosure to the defendants and that the defendants cannot have a fair trial. In Johnny's witness statement for this case, he acknowledges that he has always struggled with drug addiction problems. He states, "I have been open about my challenges with alcoholism and addiction throughout my life. In fact, I started drinking and taking drugs when I was still a child. I am not in any way embarrassed to say this." He further goes on to say that no drug or alcohol ever made him undertake violence against anyone. Johnny's lawyer states that NGN has clearly lost track of what this trial is ultimately about. Alright, so as you all may be aware by now, the High Court did rule in favor of the defendants and found that Johnny was in fact in breach of the court order issued on the 10th of March of this year, 2020, in which he was directed to submit all evidence submitted in the Virginia defamation case against Amber Heard. For those of you who don't know, the evidence is basically comprised of text messages that took place between Johnny and his assistant, Mr. Holmes, in Australia in 2015. In these text messages, Johnny was requesting Mr. Holmes to secure MDMA or happy pills and whitey or cocaine. The defendants submitted that Johnny was in breach of the court order, particularly because of the civil procedure rules, which are rules that direct how things should be done in civil cases such as this one. Unless specifically stated as discretionary, the rules are considered mandatory. The relevant rule in this situation is Rule 31.6, which states that standard disclosure requires a party to disclose only, subsection B is relevant here, the documents which adversely affect his own case, adversely affect another party's case, or support another party's case. The judge found that the defendants were correct in claiming that this evidence supports their case and is adverse to Johnny's case, and I'll explain to you why. The evidence supports the defendant's case because in their defense, they state that throughout their relationship, the claimant was controlling and verbally and physically abusive to Ms. Heard, particularly when he was under the influence of drink and/or drugs. They also specifically refer to the use of MDMA during the Australia 2015 incident, during which, if you'll remember, the tip of Johnny's finger was severed. The defendants claim that an argument broke out between Amber and Johnny over Amber's discovery of a bag of MDMA, which then, according to Amber and the defendants, led to Johnny's abusive behavior towards Amber and an alleged 3-day ordeal of domestic violence. Now, they are adverse to Johnny's side because Johnny specifically denied having MDMA in his possession at that time and denied any conversations surrounding MDMA pills. Specifically, Johnny's side claimed that for the avoidance of doubt, it is expressly denied that the claimant took MDMA, that Ms. Heard found a bag of MDMA, or that there were any conversations about MDMA. NGN's lawyer submitted that the texts were adverse to the claimant's case on the pleadings and supportive of the defendant's case because they tended to show that the claimant was seeking a supply of ecstasy shortly before the journey to Australia and very likely had obtained that drug. They also tended to show that the claimant was seeking a supply of cocaine at about the same time and felt he was in urgent need of it. They tended to show the claimant's exasperation when challenged about his use of the drugs, which supported Ms. Heard's account. And the timing of the text was significant because they all took place a few days before the pleaded assaults in Australia. Johnny's side argued that this evidence was irrelevant to the fact in issue, which is whether Johnny did in fact physically assault Amber or not. So they argued that his use of drugs or his drug-seeking behavior shouldn't have anything to do with it. Now, I would have agreed with them if the use of drugs, specifically in Australia in that time frame, was not alleged by Amber and by the defendants' news group in their pleadings. Because they were mentioned and specifically alleged, any evidence that can back up or refute these claims is relevant and therefore necessary for the case. And that is why the judge ruled for the defendants. Had the drugs not been mentioned at all in the pleadings, then the evidence would have most likely been considered irrelevant. Thankfully, the judge has granted leave for Johnny to make an application for relief from sanctions. Now, to answer the question that I've been getting from a lot of you, what will the outcome of the relief from sanctions application be? Of course, it's impossible for me to predict, but I will say that courts are bound by a set of rules and laws that govern the decision-making process in these situations. The relevant rule here is present in the civil procedure rules, and it is Rule 3.9. So on an application for relief, the court will consider all the circumstances of the case so as to enable it to deal justly with the application, including the need for litigation to be conducted efficiently and at proportionate cost, and to enforce compliance with rules, practice, directions, and orders, and an application for relief must be supported by evidence. So the judge will be taking this rule into account when making his decision, in addition to any supporting case law, which I will not be getting into for the purposes of this video because it will be an entire segment in and of itself. Now, there is a balancing act here. There's a need to make sure that the rules are followed and not taken lightly by litigants. But then there's also the need for the case to be dealt with in a just manner. So as you saw in the rule, the court will consider all circumstances of the case. Now, I think first and foremost, one of the most important factors the judge will consider is, does Johnny have any evidence in support of his application? Does he have a good reason for breaching the civil procedure rules? Other matters that the judge will most likely consider is the very fast approaching trial date, which is the 7th of July, so less than a week away at this point. I think when you really look at the matter as a whole and the fact in issue as a whole, a valid argument can be made that this evidence is relatively a small blip in the grand scheme of things, and if anything, it's just supporting evidence rather than primary or key evidence that goes to the heart of the issue. So that's pretty much all I can say about this at this point. I think it all depends on the strength of Johnny's excuse or the validity of his excuse. Is there a good reason for why this happened? Because if it's just an oversight and an honest mistake, I would be very confident in saying that the judge will consider that and grant relief. However, if it was willful or deceptive behavior, then it could go the other way. I hope this clears things out for you guys. And I do want to say, stay positive. I know it's very frustrating and it's difficult because Johnny seemed to have such a strong case, and the idea of it getting thrown out because of this new update is quite disheartening. But have faith in the system and just hope that Johnny has a good reason and supporting evidence that is strong and that could help him out in his application. Like I said, I will keep you guys posted as soon as the ultimate decision is released. Thank you so much for watching. Stay positive, stay safe, and I will catch you in your future video.